well, pretty much both this calendar year and this Rotary year. So we were formed by a Rotary Club, and that club was the Helston Lizard Club. Still exists. They're in Cornwall, England, way down the southwest corner of the UK there. And they did a global assessment and kind of looked at big disasters and what were the items that were missing in those disasters. And prominently, it kept coming back to shelter, proper family shelter. But there are also a lot of other aid items that they thought would be very beneficial that you don't see a lot of in post-disaster response work in the year 2000. Those things included mosquito nets, pots and pans, blankets and ground covers, water filters. Originally, they were the water purification tablets, but it's since evolved to water filters, water carriers, and things like rope, which a lot of people just think it's rope's got kind of one purpose, but if you really think about it, rope's got a lot of purposes. And we've even had families destrand sections of the rope so they can repair fishing nets, so it gets them back into their family business. Now, we realized in the first few years that we needed to have a variety of tents. There are different situations to live in. Sometimes it could be quite cold, other times quite hot. The tent on the right is our Flex 3 tent. That is capable of withstanding Wisconsin winters with a wood-burning stove inside. I wouldn't want to live in it for a winter. I wouldn't want to live in any tent for a long period of time. But if that was something I had to do, having some of those comforts of proper draft and warmth and security of zippers and mosquito nets built into the doorways, those are all things that keep me healthy and safe. We also learned through the years, first 20 years, that there are options other than tents. And around the world, our shelter kit is much preferred by families over the tent. And that seems kind of backwards by North American standards. I'd rather have a tent than a tarp anytime. The families we serve in areas of the world are looking at items like the tarps and the tools that are provided in our shelter kits. And they're looking not only at either repairing or replacing a home, but also the other purposes they could use those tarps for down the road. A tent is basically always going to be a tent. It can't be converted and haul crops in, or it can't be a temporary structure as people expand their homes. So the shelter kit also comes with a smaller sized shelter box, or can come if need be. And in that smaller green box are those items like water filters, solar lights, and the items that would be other than shelter in the shelter box. So through the years, we've had some real notable deployments. We really kind of found our sweet spot where we function best and have the greatest impact in the 3,000 to 5,000 family range. But we have been able to gear and scale up for larger deployments, and we oftentimes will be working in areas where there's 1,000 to 2,000 families that are in need of help that we can reach in a reasonable amount of time. Our first large scale deployment, though, was in early 2005 after the Indian Ocean tsunami struck in Southeast Asia. That happened the day after Christmas, and that's a vacation spot for people all over Southern Asia. So there were a lot of people that had come into the area, and in addition to being the high time for everyone hiring, and it's the time where everyone seems to be congregating, or at least in the old days, in these areas of the world. So that was a huge disaster, and we helped over 22,000 families across 4 different countries, and it really set ShelterBox on a global stage. The UN Shelter Cluster, which at that time was not even an official organization or association amongst organizations around the world, but those organizations found out about us. And inside Rotary as well, this deployment really set us on the global stage of a Rotary Clubs project, not funded by Rotary International, not funded by the Rotary Foundation, but a club raising funds to get this work done. Of course, it's grown well beyond a club, and there's no club in Rotary, I think, could handle the type of work that we do within their own club. We had to branch out, and so the Helston Lizard Club made ShelterBox a trust, which is the same thing as a 401 or 501c3 here in the United States. In the UK, it's called a trust. So it became its own charity. and ShelterBox USA is the American U.S. Affiliate of that global charity. After Haiti in 2010, that's still our largest response to a natural disaster. It's interesting. We're learning now that that's not really a good term to use. We should just call them disasters, because a lot of times it's man's encroachment upon coastlines that creates the disaster. We're encroaching in areas. We're populated, like the Houston area after Hurricane Harvey. A lot of the people displaced there in the natural world, that disaster wouldn't have hit people. But since we live now the way we do around the world, congregating in coastlines, we're going to see those types of disasters more often. We helped over 33,000 families in total after Haiti, and that was 28,000 initially in 2010, and then finding folks even in the 2011 and 2012 that were still needing shelter after that disaster. Our longest ongoing disaster is in response to the Syrian crisis. That crisis will enter its 10th year in March. We've been responding there since the fall of 2012. That's in countries where Syrians have been left to go to as refugees in Lebanon and Jordan, Iraq and Turkey and Greece, as well as providing shelter to families within Syria itself. I'll talk more about this a little bit later. We basically have had one project after another, without much of a break, other than to try and find some more funding at times in Syria. We've helped over 60,000 families. So the original goal of the Hellston Lizard Club was to help 10 families a year. And like all good Rotary ideas, other clubs found out about it. The supply chain started growing, the network of knowledge started growing, the funding started growing, and that really has led now to over 1.6 million people being sheltered over this 20 years cycle. That's still, though, just a drop in the bucket compared to what the need is in the world. Currently, 104 million people are displaced, 25 million due to disasters, 80 million thereabouts because of conflict. That's the highest number on record. That is more than World War I and World War II human displacements combined. So right now there's a tremendous need to shelter people who have been displaced due to war. So how this partnership works, well, it's really a lot more than just a club's idea. It really boils down to volunteers, and it'd be great to get more volunteers up there in 6250. We had Greg Krauska. I don't think he's in 6250. He might be in a neighboring district there, who was a great volunteer for several years, but he's gone on to do some other things, fabulous things, but they don't have the time to expand out. He's actually in Minnesota, but he can't get up into your district anymore, where once he did. So it'd be great to get a team of volunteers available for us to help spread the word of what we do. It's really important work in the world. We started funding through Rotary. We're Rotary Club's project, so it's a kind of a, it has to be talked about. But it's really grown as well. We get more funding outside of Rotary nowadays than we do within Rotary, and that's fabulous. So that doesn't mean we don't need Rotary money. We need it desperately. And one way that we've been able to really keep clubs engaged is through our HERO program. That was actually started by a district governor. It was his idea. He challenged the clubs in his district to pony up some money at various levels, depending on how the clubs could do. And they had over 50% of their clubs in the first year be heroes. And like all good Rotary ideas, other districts found out about it. And Louis Turpin, who was that now past district governor, let us know that we should do this across the country. So we said, you bet, we'd love the idea. And we have special awards that go out to hero clubs. And last year we had over 530 hero clubs across the United States, last Rotary year. But beyond fundraising and volunteer advocating for us here in North America, ShelterBox is a global organization, and one thing Rotary's been instrumental in is really helping us grow globally. We have had a lot of help in now having a full operations center in the Philippines, where we have responded more than anywhere else in the world. We have a pre-positioned gear in Panama that right this minute is being ready to ship into Honduras after 2 hurricanes went through that area. So that pre-positioning of gear around the world has just been a great help to us. Rotary clubs and Rotarians where disasters strike, that is also from the assessment phase, which would be this gentleman in the picture just going out and seeing the devastation and noting it and finding out how many people lived in this spot to the follow-up phase, which is where he's at now, which is going to go and talk to that family again now that they have their ShelterBox tent and see what kind of impact we've helped make in their lives to make them help them recover. Importation of gear, that's a lot harder this year than it has been in years past. Getting gear around, transportation in a country, translations, and I think most importantly, people. When we respond to a disaster, we aren't a large organization. I think that's something a lot of people don't understand. We have very small teams of people we send out, so we rely on those local organizations. Oftentimes, Rotary, as you see here, this is the Batangas Midwest Club in the Philippines, and they helped pretty much, they didn't help, they pretty much ran a response force after a volcanic eruption earlier this year. So where we are in the world right now, well, we couldn't be much busier, and we're pretty much at capacity considering COVID-19. And Tim, by the way, I see a couple people squinting, so I know not everyone's on a nice big screen. I will send you a PDF of all these slides so that you'll have them at your disposal there. Some of the areas like the Philippines, we just did some response work there. I'll talk a little bit about that later. That is purple right now. Purple is an assessment phase when we go, or a post-distribution phase when we go back and we survey the number of the families we helped there, find out if what we gave them is making a difference. That's important stuff. That helps us grow. Things like solar lights came from those conversations in the past. A lot of our work is in the implementation phase right now, and that's when the rubber meets the road. That's when people are getting their gear. In Syria, there's no Rotary, so there's a lot of areas of the world where there's very little help from Rotary. In Sudan, we're helping thousands of families for flooding. There's 21 Rotarians. That's it in the whole country of 41 million people in Sudan. So we really are Rotary's reach in a lot of the areas of the world. And it's so important right now because of COVID-19, why people displaced in an evacuation center or a collection center or in a refugee camp, why are they at more risk than those of us on this call? Well, it's really two things. Number one, the countries where we work in the world, they don't have the healthcare systems we have. So they're already at additional risk there. But then on top of that, it's about population density. We've seen and are now seeing again how our major cities, as densely populated as they are being close, if not needing additional hospital space for COVID-19. The Putalong refugee camp in Bangladesh, that is 120,000 people per square mile. And this is a picture of that camp. You can see the importance of tarps, primary roofing materials, and walls as well. But there's absolutely no roads, there's no plumbing, there's no electricity. You can see how something like COVID-19 will just go right through an area like this. And we're seeing it, unfortunately. The numbers in these areas are not being reported as huge numbers because there simply isn't the testing being done. But COVID-19 is impacting the hospitals and healthcare systems in less developed countries and the people in refugee camps as well. So why we make a difference is our structures, even as simple as these might look, get families away from one another. It gets families isolated from one another. It's pretty much the same exact thing we're doing on this call. Mike, you've got a tent. Tim, you've got a tent. I've got a tent. We're all in our little tents. Of course, right now, our tents are pretty nice. They've got plumbing and electricities and kitchens and garages, and central air or heat this time of year. But we're able to isolate from one another. And that's why it's so important that we do what we're doing in the world, and we continue doing it through this pandemic. In the Philippines, we've had 5 projects during the pandemic. We've assisted now over 8,000 households across those 5 projects. One was a hospital expansion on the island of Cebu. They are and were and still are overrun with COVID-19 patients. So by putting temporary structures up, similar to what we saw in New York City, but there's no agencies across the Philippines that are able to do this work on a moment's notice. So we were able to help there. And Typhoon Goni, which was the highest recorded winds to make landfall in a typhoon in the world this year, and the strongest to hit landfall in the Philippines since Haiyan back in 2015. This was an incredible partnership. The Rotary clubs in throughout the Philippines are fabulous supporters to us, not so much financially as it is logistically. And it was Rotarians who contacted high-ranking officials in the Philippine Navy. So we were able to get our gear from the island of Cebu up northwards, just south of Manila, and we were able to do a response there. So it was Rotary, the Philippine Navy, and other national and international NGOs that really collaborated to help over 5,000 families there. So it may just be tarps that we distribute a lot. We still do tents, don't get me wrong. We do a lot of tents. I'll talk about those in a second, but these tarps really like Maricel, that made the most difference. And for Jenny, they now have a comfortable home to live in. And they make it home. That's what I really love about the tarps, is people really, they really decorate things, and it really, it's not an emergency shelter at this time. It's home for the near future. Lake Chad Basin, this is an area that's really the forgotten crisis around the world. They have terrorism, which is rampant throughout the whole 4 countries that surround Lake Chad. Boko Haram and Nigeria alone has displaced 2.5 million people. You can count hundreds of thousands in Chad, Niger, and Cameroon to that total. You have Lake Chad itself, which is an ecological disaster. The climate changed in this area for over 20 years. They had a drought. This lake in the low-lying areas would fill in with sand in the dry seasons. So currently, and for the foreseeable future, Lake Chad will never again be the lake it once was. As these low-lying areas fill in with sand, there's less area for water to accumulate. So that's already a complex issue with the lack of water driving people around, and then terrorism. And Boko Haram figures if they can control the water, they can control the people, and they've been really successful with that strategy in this region. ShelterBox works in all 4 countries around Lake Chad Basin. The one we do most work in, though, is the Minawao camp in Cameroon. It's about 50 miles inside the border of Nigeria, about 250, 300 miles, I think, maybe a little bit more than that from Lake Chad itself. And it's the home to nearly 70,000 people. It's such a large facility. You can see it on Google Maps. That's the credit I'll give to these photos here. Only thing I altered was I put the little red circle on them as I zoomed in to keep it centered on what is 50 homes, 50 families worth of tents. ShelterBox is the only supplier of tents to new arrivals in Minawao. This is pre-COVID-19. This is what a training day would look like. Training is very important to us. We train people on every single item they get. That includes things simple like a solar light, because if you've never had something with an on-off switch or a button, the on-off, you know how hard it is to do our phones. Even something like a solar light could really be perplexing, and people might not know how to charge it. So we train on everything. In Minawao, it's almost 85% female population, because unfortunately the men are being killed in the Boko Haram raids in their respective countries. The post or now COVID-19, it's not post yet. Can't wait till I say when we did COVID-19 work, but right now we're still delivering aid in a much different look. We're still reaching the families that need it. This is Fan. She received her tent over the summer when she left her home for the second time in Nigeria. The first time Boko Haram attacked, her husband was injured and eventually lost his leg. The second time after they relocated in Nigeria, the second time they were attacked, her husband said to go without him. And his last parting words were to get them Minawao. I never had heard a story like, I've heard the story a lot of times, but that husbands tell their family to leave because they stay behind and fight, and they never make it. But that Minawao is a destination, a camp where there's tens of thousands of families living in tents and structures that have been placed there through efforts of ShelterBox and Rotary. That's a destination of safety for people. That's just something that just hit me so hard. I never fathomed what Fan and her family went through. But she's now in the camps. They're able to isolate, able to stay away from crowded places. They also received soap and wash basins, something we're doing now as well. So they've got a much better chance now at making it through this pandemic safely. Syria, we're doing our winter relief in Syria right now. Like I said, there's no Rotary clubs in Syria. In fact, the only thing that where someone in Syria may even know where Rotary even exists would be on boxes like this that have the Rotary emblems. I can't tell you where in the country this picture is, but this is taken within the last couple of weeks. The northwest area of the country is called Idlib, and that's one area where we work. We also work in the eastern parts of Syria as well. Most of the fighting is still in the northwest in Idlib. There's this calendar year over 1 million people displaced, and many of those people are displaced not for the first time, not for the second time, but for 6 to 10 times. Families have had to just leave with clothes on their back. So in Syria, we work with other aid agencies, Relief Aid, Hand in Hand for Syria, the Bahar organization, and ShelterBox collaborate. And our aid this winter includes things you hear of before: tents, tarps, ropes. But we also put things like warmer blankets. We include carpets. We include mattresses. Those are what you see stacked in the gray plastic wrap there. So our solar lights there also have phone chargers, because we found most people in Syria have a phone, but a lot of times they don't have a way of charging that phone. So we have a solar light with a phone charger, and it's a huge help. Soap and wash basins, and I think most importantly, warm children's clothing. Last winter, now it doesn't get Wisconsin cold in Syria, but last winter, 3 dozen children were documented as freezing to death because they didn't have the basic necessities to keep them warm. So for a number of years, even prior to that, we've been doing clothing distributions in Syria in the wintertime, really adapting our overall aid package so that families like and her children here can have a fighting chance to survive the wintertime. Right now, we're distributing aid to 1,500 displaced families in the northwest of Syria. We're able to do that, everything you see in this picture, for under $400 per family of 5. That's astonishing work. In Honduras, the aid package that we're putting together there, that's currently in Panama, getting ready for shipment. We're helping families there for less than $170 per family. That's what the things they need to recover from both Eta and Iota, the twin hurricanes that struck there last month. This month, we received a notice that we maintained our Charity Navigator 4-star rating. Very proud of that rating. That means that financially, we managed the donor dollar well. Our GuideStar Platinum participant and also transparency participant as well. I don't put them all up on here. The GuideStar is another watchdog group here in the United States to make sure that charities are doing a good financial awareness of the donor dollar. But I think more importantly than anything is being notified the last 2 years that we were Nobel Peace Prize nominees. That truly, to me, says we're making an impact on people displaced because of conflict in this world. So with that, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm sorry if I went a couple minutes late, but I don't get back in your neck of the woods that often, so I wanted to take advantage of it here today. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Mike and Susan and Roy, Marissa, and Chase. I don't often get to say everyone's name, so thanks everybody for having me.
Thanks both
for
coming, talking to us and letting us know what you're doing. The first time I actually heard about ShelterBox was through pets. I saw you guys there, so that was the first kind of information that I had and learned about it and knew the great things that you guys are doing. So thank you.
You're welcome, Tim.
I don't know if anyone has any questions. And you had said that you would send the presentation then. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll send the presentation. Right now, we're trying really hard. We need to raise I think we're around $200,000 still for our Honduras response to help. I believe the number currently is 3,200 families. So we actually our hero program right now. I have a proposal. Typically, we don't do designated funding at ShelterBox because we don't like to pit disasters against one another, because we always have a multiple number of disasters that we're working to do. But with COVID-19, we're stretched so thin logistically support-wise, people-wise, and financially, that we've got a special offer, so to speak, to Rotary clubs right now for this month, and as long as we need to fund it, so probably well into January. So I'll send you the link to that as well, and then just some links to our website and stuff for general knowledge. I think Rotary opens opportunities every day, and the ShelterBox was my opportunity in 2010 as a Rotary member of my club who thought, wow, this is pretty cool. I should tell other clubs about this. So I think there's opportunities as well for club growth. We see it in the areas where there are disasters, and Rotarians are the face of that ShelterBox response, like in the Philippines. And then the families they serve, when they're recovering, they're like, hey, we want to join your group. We're really impressed with what you do, and we want to help. And we've seen significant numbers of Rotarians join, or people join and become Rotarians after a disaster strike. So I think the same philosophy could be done in just advocating for those same families in the end, whether families in the Philippines, families in Syria, or wherever else in the world where we're working, to have more volunteers in different districts that can go out and talk about what we're doing in different clubs, that could do district conference updates. 5 minutes on a podium at district conference is gold to us. It really, really is. And of course, if it's virtual, I can come and do it myself, but I hope not to have to do that in the coming years. I hope we get back to normal soon. So with that being said, having more volunteers, I think is good for club growth. I've got so many good ideas when I go out and I'm sitting to talk to a club in person or even virtually that I bring back to my club. And our club's gotten better with some of those ideas. So I think it's a win-win situation. To volunteer for ShelterBox, to support ShelterBox, really emphasizes your Rotary experience.
Okay. Great. So when you send that, I did record this, so I do plan on putting it through a YouTube presentation for anyone that wasn't here or anyone that wants to get the links. I'll email those out as well, but I'll make sure that they're in the links, so that way people can get through it that way.
Thank you.